Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a weekly deep dive into the world of college admissions.
My name is Vince, and I've been doing admissions since 1989 and college counseling since 1998 in California.
I'm Lisa, and I'm a clinical psychologist and college counselor. I have a daughter in college, a daughter in high school, and a son in middle school. After 30 years in Chicago, we recently moved to North Carolina.
My name is Mark. I'm a college coach in Atlanta and the parent of two daughters. Karis, a graduate of Davidson College, and she is the founder of the Spanish tutoring company, SpanishHelpToday.com. And Joy is a wellness coach at the Keenan Flagler Business School at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And I'm so blessed to be able to work alongside both my beautiful daughters at School Match for You, a college counseling firm that I founded in 2010. This week in the news, Vince and I are going to answer a question from a listener while also discussing an article on the lawsuit that's being brought against a bunch of selective colleges saying, in effect, early decision programs are discriminatory and should be illegal. So we'll combine a hot topic in the news with a question from a listener on that one. We'll have part 2 of my interview with Daniel Chambliss, author of the book, How College Works. And we will continue to discuss the research findings he found in his decade-long study about how college works. Then we'll have part 3 or 4 of Grant Gosselin's deep dive into Boston College. Grant is the chief enrollment officer at Boston College in Chestnut Hill, Massachusetts.
And now it's time for Hot Topics in the News.
All right, Vince, we've got a pretty, incendiary topic of the day. Another one that's kind of coming after the most selective schools, lawsuit against a group of the most selective schools for the use of early decision.
Hey, Mark and the YCBK team. Thanks so much for all of the great content you provide. Wanted to get your thoughts and analysis on the merits of the new lawsuit challenging the legality and fairness of early decision admission policies at the nation's top colleges. The suit alleges early decision violates antitrust laws and accuses the schools of participating in an illegal conspiracy to inflate the costs of higher education through the collective enforcement of early decision admissions policies. As a mom of 2 high schoolers, I'm interested in hearing you address this on a future podcast. Thanks.
You want to summarize the article, for our listeners, so those who have not read it or don't know what we're talking about?
Sure, absolutely. So antitrust lawsuit challenges early decision programs in the Chronicle, from the Chronicle of Higher Education. And this was written by Eric Cooper, August 8, 2025. So basically, the summary is that 4 current and former college students have filed a class action lawsuit alleging that 32 highly selective private institutions use early decision in admissions violates federal antitrust law. The complaint filed Friday in the U.S. District Court for the District of Massachusetts asserts that institutions engage in practices that entrench patterns of inequality of access while inflating the price of attendance. The plaintiffs claim that colleges' collective enforcement of early decision programs are a horizontal agreement to reduce or eliminate competition. The lawsuit names some of the nation's most prominent institutions, including Columbia University, Dartmouth College, Vanderbilt University, and Williams College. It also names, and I thought this is really interesting, Consortium of Financing Higher Education, COFI, a group of highly selective private colleges that share data on admissions, financial aid, and costs. The Common Application, I thought that was the most interesting, which operates the widely used admissions platform, and SCORE, which runs a shared admissions platform called the Coalition Application. So for our listeners, the Common Application is an application where you can submit the application to multiple schools, and this Coalition app is the same, is similar to that, has different facets to it. But one of the things students applying for early decision, known as ED, at a given college agree to attend if admitted, and at which point they're expected to promptly, if they're admitted, they're expected to promptly withdraw any applications to other institutions. Critics have long contended that ED tends to benefit wealthier applicants because it takes away from the student's ability to compare financial aid offers from multiple colleges. I think that it's also important that many highly selective colleges with ED programs provide substantial financial aid to families with significant financial need. That's why some college access experts say applying early decision can benefit high achieving low income students who, if admitted, often receive more generous financial aid offers than they would get during the regular decision process. Many private institutions with a low acceptance rate admit a large share of their freshman class through ED, an incentive to apply early. The ED agreements aren't legally enforceable, but they're described as binding commitments, both by the Common Application and the Coalition application require applicants to sign a document stating if they're admitted, they must enroll except in cases of financial hardship or if their aid offer makes attendance impossible. The plaintiffs allege that many named institutions facilitate and enforce anti-competitive restraints in part by sharing the names of early decision admits with other institutions, which the lawsuit describes as a coordinated agreement not to recruit or admit students accepted under another institution's ED program. The practice harms students, the complaint says, and by preventing competition for a subgroup of applicants. Early decision applicants lose choice and negotiation leverage for financial aid, while regular decision applicants are left to scramble for an artificially diminished number of admission slots doled out at lower acceptance rates. Benjamin Brown, co-chair of the antitrust practice and managing partner at Cohen, Milstein, Sellers, and Toll, who represents the plaintiffs, wrote in a statement, "We contend that all of this is only made possible by an agreement not to compete that violates bedrock antitrust law." The plaintiffs seek an injunction to end the use of early decision programs as well as past damages for students admitted via early decision who are allegedly forced to pay more than they would have otherwise. So that's the backdrop of the article. It's an important article. Again, we seem to stumble upon hotbed admissions issue every year since 2016. Affirmative action, COVID, restricted early action, the use of the ACT sort of changing formats. There seems to be at every turn something new to contend with. Legacy. Oh, thank you. Yeah, legacy is definitely one of those things. And then sort of, with international student population and applications, really that the landscape is shifting. International students have had to contend with that, as well as some thinking that there might be more space at these highly selective places if less international students are admitted. So what are your thoughts about early decision and this case, this lawsuit?
Well, my initial thought is that felt like it's poppycock, like it's not going anywhere. But that's what I thought about the 2022 case. So we talked about in 2022, a group of plaintiffs filed a first-class antitrust lawsuit against 17 elite schools, alleging that the institutions had violated federal law by conspiring to artificially reduce the financial aid offers of students. And I even came on here and I said, good luck winning that. And of those 17 highly selective schools in the lawsuit, 12 of them have settled for more than $300 million without agreeing to any wrongdoing. So I didn't think that had a chance. We are in a climate right now where there's just a lot of interest in owning the libs, I guess you could say.
Yes.
Owning the libs. And so the interesting thing about this, so there was two things in this article that I found interesting. One was it was making the point that early decision reduces competition because you don't get to see what others would offer you financially. And we know that that's true. But that is true, right? Like sometimes I try to talk people out of early decision because I can tell it's from working with them, it's going to be very financially onerous. And having done this for a long time, we know the kind of student that if they're applying to the right schools, they can walk away with some very, very generous merit-based awards.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, is it really worth it for you to pay $100,000 when that's way beyond what you're comfortable paying, when you have the kind of student that could maybe pay half of that and really attend some very fine institutions? So that's just a fact. And we know, Vince and I know what some of those schools are. So I don't think there's any doubt about the fact that that is true, that early decision doesn't necessarily result in your best financial offer. If anything, I would think their case might be stronger if they talked about the way colleges present. We meet full demonstrated need is deceiving people into making them think you're never going to get a better financial offer elsewhere other than this, the way they present it. That to me might almost seem a little bit more credible. And Bob Massa said this on, the last segment I had with, second last segment I had with him, 4 or 5 with Susan. He said a lot of times at schools, we don't do a good enough job telling people that they can get out of the ED commitment if the money doesn't work.
Yep, I heard that today.
Yeah, you heard that today. Yeah, so maybe that's a point that could be brought in, like schools aren't presenting it the right way. They like to make people have the fear and maybe the scare that it's legally binding when it's not. So I guess somebody could rule that, yeah, it's an anti-competitive practice. I mean, none of us thought they were going to They were going to do the things they did 4 or 5 years ago where they let you recruit people that are already admitted. And NACAC had to walk back all of their policies that they had against schools, giving incentives for ED and everything. And they said, no, those are anti-competitive practices. So I guess it's possible that it could come down. Yeah, it's an anti-competitive practice. And it's not in the applicant's best financial interest. You never know how these issues are going to be ruled by the courts. Courts are comprised of different individuals, no matter how educated they are, and they have their own biases that they bring to the table. What I thought was surprising in this article is it talked about schools share each other's data with other schools, and that's an anti-competitive practice.
Right.
Like, where's the proof that that's happening? That's not something that's just customarily done in a widespread way, where they put out to all the other people, in their group, like, here's the people that got an ED. That's something that I think they'd have to prove that an institution is doing that or how it's being used.
Well, when I was in admissions, I do remember lists being sent around, and this was, in the 90s. So
yeah,
I have to assume that it's probably faster now that it comes.
Well,
faster.
The thing about that, though, Vince, like there was that lawsuit that was brought about after the 90s for people sharing financial packages. And so
did that stop?
A lot of schools that were doing that stopped that after that lawsuit. So certainly, that was happening in the 90s with certain schools. And it was a little bit of a, hey, just want to make sure that you're not applying ED because we share with our overlaps who else is in ED. So a little bit of a disincentive for people trying to apply to multiple schools. But I'm not aware of anybody doing that openly. And if it's covert, I think it's really, really covert. I think it might be done more on a friendship level. Well, this is my best friend. He's over here, kind of really and even then, I don't know if it's being done. So I was like, they just asserted that like that was a fact. Like I was like, where's the proof? But schools have become so addicted to ED that I have a theory that even if a lawsuit like this was to prevail, it would lead to a whole underground channel where people would work with people like you and me and school counselors, and you would get almost the tacit ED. Like, this student has promised me they'll come, or people would be writing first choice letters. I guarantee you that I'll come. Like, it would lead to a whole secret world of, like, this is a thing. And actually Massa brought this up in that interview as well. one thing that I think the public might be surprised with is how the most competitive schools in the country want to lock people in almost like the less selective ones. Because if you're getting into them, you're getting into their peers and you're still hard to yield. And I could share a lot of stories on this. I have so many stories I could share. Obviously, UChicago going to ED0, there's an example. But, we talked about Duke, a few weeks ago. When I was at KIPP, the co-founder of Oak Tree Capital Management, someone who has been on Forbes 400 list, someone who is worth over $2 billion, and a 1977 alum of Duke University with an economics degree. I'm referring to Bruce Karsh, who is a very wealthy individual and very generous philanthropist. He gave $2.5 million to Penn and $5 million to Duke for KIPP students. So we had between 50 to 60 students at both Duke and UPenn. Because when a big donor gives money, nobody wants to turn around to the donor. When the donor says, "What did you do with my money?" and they say we struck out, nobody wants that conversation.
Right.
I remember a week I spent at going through the Harvard graduate admission certification training program, and Eric Furta, who was at UPenn at that time, he came up to me and he was like, "I want 4 from you next year. We got 3. I want 4. Like, this is an Ivy League school." Right? So, but this is what happens when big money talks. So Karsh gave $5 million for this program for Duke, and Duke would fly our students in 4 days, four full days there, 3 overnights. And this is all before the ED1 process. And then they watching and observing everybody. And then they picked out the ones that they wanted. And they basically said, this was in writing. This is how the program was set up. "We are making you an offer to meet full demonstrated need contingent on you applying ED." I mean, look at Questbridge, look at Posse. These are all ED programs. These schools don't want to go all the way through this process and then have the kid get 5 offers. It completely breaks down all their yield models, and it's going to blow their acceptance rates up, and they're going to have to do a whole lot of different things that they don't want to do. So they're addicted to locking people in. And it's not, I don't want to make it sound like it's all sinister.
Right.
Because when I was on that side and when you were on that side, it was very important to me that I knew if somebody was coming versus if I didn't. Very important.
Yes.
So I don't want to make it sound like this is like nefarious behavior. It just, your job is to bring in the best class that you can bring in. And it's an incredibly helpful tool to help you bring in your class if you have people committing. And getting rid of the competition. Friends, I was talking to one of my students about a week ago. And I said to him, I'm like, "What have you learned so far this year in college admissions?" And he says, "I can't believe how aggressive these schools are at getting me to try to apply through early decision, through ED." The student went on to say, "I just got a flyer today that said, why applying ED to American may be the best decision you ever make." And he was like, "Please give me a break."
Yeah, I can't imagine the chaos that will ensue if they take away ED.
Yeah, in fact, it's so much chaos. I really don't think there's no doubt in my mind it leads to backdoor ED. Like, what would backdoor ED look like? Think about it.
Is that legal though? I mean, can you
No, so this is how backdoor ED would work. Like, a counselor at an independent school or people like you and I, we would have communication and this kid has made it perfectly clear to me that they're going to come. So it's no ED. Another way, I don't know if you ever did this, Vince, but I used to do this when I was working with students. I used to have them write first choice letters. Like, let's say they missed an ED. Let's say a kid discovered after November 1, "Oh my goodness, I should have applied ED." I would have them write first choice letters and say, "You have my word. I will come if you admitted me. I didn't discover your school until after November 1, or my parents weren't going to let me apply ED at first because of money, but we've worked through that." Now, they had to guarantee me that they were going to do it because I'm feel like I'm putting my reputation on the line a little bit. So I've been part of backdoor EDs before, just on an individual one-off type of way. There's just no way the schools are going to give up. Like you said, there's no way they're going to go back to not. Think about it for athletic recruiting. Can you imagine? Coach not knowing who the team's going to be until May 1st? It's just not going to happen.
And then it continues to reward the people with the most privilege.
It does.
It will.
But they're addicted to it, and I don't see it going away, even if it has to be done through informal channels.
And what I see is if it's done through informal channels, it's whoever has access to the informal channels, the most access, that will benefit. So
You're right. It's not equitable.
no, if you're at a high school that's considered very formidable, they'll they'll make sure that the funnel stays open. Let me just say it that way.
Yeah. No, and I appreciate your sensitivity to access and bringing that up and putting that in the forefront of the conversation. It's not a fair system. The hard part about the system is think about every single component that goes into, just for lack of a better word, helping put a thumb on the scale to help a kid in the admission process.
Mm-hmm.
Every single component of it being well-resourced is a benefit, right? If you're well-resourced, you can start little Johnny taking fencing lessons in 4th grade, or little Jane, getting her bassoon lessons in the 2nd grade. And now they can be competitive for the orchestra or for the fencing team. You can move into the best suburban neighborhoods and get into the best public schools, or you can enroll in the best independent, day or boarding schools. You can hire the best test prep tutors. You can hone your extracurriculars. You can hire the writing coaches. You can work with independent counselors on aspects of strategy and coaching, whether it's ED strategy or everything, rec strategy. I mean, all components of this process benefit the person with resources.
Mm-hmm.
All of it. It just is what it is. Like, we don't live in a perfect society. And friends, I'm not against ED at all. I don't want you to get that impression. My oldest daughter applied ED. It was the best decision for her. My youngest daughter didn't, and that was the best decision for her. And as parents, we love our kids. Of course, we're going to try to give them every advantage we can with our resources. That doesn't mean you just throw your hands up and say, oh, it is what it is. You don't do anything to try to fight some inequities and try to level the playing field. That's why you appreciate the Questbridges and, and the other CBOs that are out there, the KIPs and the posses and these other people that are out there in the trenches, or you appreciate schools when they do what they can to maybe do fly-in programs or to travel to under-resourced neighborhoods. Like, you appreciate things that are done to try to create more access. But you're naive if you're thinking that there's some type of, that the admissions process is really never a pure meritocracy. It never really is, because think about literally every single component. Demonstrated interest. Well, for some people, some schools use demonstrated interest in their formula. A big part of their formula is whether you visited. So there's that's a resource issue right there.
Yeah, yeah, the world without, moving people forward. What yeah, so much would change. You'd have students, oh, I can apply in January, and then the pushback, like, oh, all of December is gone because I'm, on the Zoom trying to work out 40 to 50 essays due to 3 colleges.
Yeah, and there's a lot of factors too. Like, I just, once again, I don't want to make it sound like these sinister, colleges with their tricks. Because, like, one thing I like to say to my students is, do you ever have a hard time knowing what your 17 or 18-year-old's going to do? You ever find them unpredictable? Everybody's, yeah. I say, well, try. What if your job depends on you predicting the behavior of 5,000 18-year-olds? And whether they're going to enroll in your school or not, they change their mind every day. Like, it's very tough, right? I remember when I had Greg Roberts from UVA on the podcast, and they over-enrolled 4% that year. And he's like, I'm not smart enough to figure out which of all these kids is coming or not. Like, they were internally bringing data scientists into their admission office, and they went to ED to add a little bit more predictability. So this is not castigating the schools. I think that we would be hypocritical and disingenuous, because you and I both were participants in when we were on that other side of seeing an extra thumb on the scale for someone who was making the commitment.
Right.
From the school side of things. So what are your thoughts? Do you have any thoughts on whether they'll prevail or not? Like, my hands are thrown up because I didn't think they would win on the last one. So I have no idea. But I know the zeitgeist right now is to kind of be anti-elite schools.
I think they will prevail. And I wonder if the solution will be that there'll be some way that they can continue as long as the financial aid doesn't change. Like the shenanigans that you get with ED. Like if you apply ED, if you apply and get into Miami ED, you can't offer them. You have to offer them the same thing that you would offer them in regular. That if that maybe is the way that they work it out. But that to me is really pie in the sky.
Yeah, but a lot of schools are doing that. The problem with ED is you apply to Miami, now you're on the hook for $100K, and you don't realize another school was offering you a $40,000 merit scholarship, and their price tag was $80,000, and you would have come away paying $40,000 instead of $100,000, so you're out $60K. That's what some of this, the language in this seemed to indicate. Like you're putting people at a competitive disadvantage because they don't get to see all their offers.
Right. Which shifts some people, but I rarely find. I mean, I had one student last year shift out of their ED, but and I know that particular school wasn't thrilled about it, but that they needed to see the money. So
yeah, the more I think about it, I don't know how this would work, because if let's say they overrule, like you might be right. Let's say they prevail. Are they going to make exceptions for athletes? Because there's no way in the world coaches are going to go, going to be able, how in the world am I going to,
especially with name like image out there right now. And then these kids making $300 million. Stop. You're not coming. Sorry. We can't. Everyone's applying in January. I just can't even imagine how it will change.
Well, Vince, we're a lot better at grappling with the issues and discussing the ramifications than we are at solving these problems and figuring out what they're going to do.
Right. And I think to sort of predict that, because we are living in a changing world, and this could be just one of those things that really continues to create havoc and what feels like chaos. It wouldn't be chaos. Eventually we would figure out how to manage it, but the uncertainty.
There's no doubt in my mind it leads to underground ED if it happens, like informal underground ED.
Yeah.
So, but let's cross that bridge if we get there. We'll definitely be back again to discuss it if they prevail in the lawsuit.
Oh man, the shenanigans. This is back to the last century when they weren't like Jewish people into the Ivy League. I think we returned to that shenanigans.
I know it's chaos. Thanks, my friend. I always appreciate our conversations, and I know we got at least another one on our docket. So Vince and I will be back to talk about how kids are graduating with comp sci degrees and can't find jobs.
Yeah,
in this AI world, and so that's our next topic. So you guys can look forward to that. Thanks, my friend.
Thank you,
friends. I want to recommend a resource for you. Jeff Salingo, who we've had on this podcast, and in my interview with Jeff, when he was on our podcast, he talked about his new upcoming book. Well, that book has come out, and the book is called Dream School. I finished it on the plane by Audible on my trip here to Orlando. I thought the book was very well researched, and what I really appreciated so much about Dream School is that it echoes the same themes we emphasize over and over and over on this podcast. A mom I'm working with on the West Coast read the book before me, and she said to me, the book's message is the core message of your podcast. You don't have to obsess over trying to go to a college with a single-digit admit rate, thinking that this is what you need to do in order to be successful in life, when there are hundreds of colleges out there educating kids very well and producing very successful graduates. You don't have to obsess over getting into a so-called dream school. The book talks about the mental health damage this insanity is doing to our kids. I feel like one New York Times author, Frank Bruni, author of the outstanding book Where You'll Go Is Not Who You'll Be, literally took the baton and passed it off to another New York Times columnist, Jeff Salingo, to carry the torch and to spread the gospel of sanity when it comes to college admissions. I plan on asking Jeff back on the podcast in 2026 to talk about Dream School. Right now he's doing a lot of TV appearances. But I brought it up for two reasons. One is because I thought the book was well researched, and I believe its core message, and I did want to recommend it. But I also wanted you to know that in Dream School, Salingo positively talks about another book. It's the same book Bob Massa told our listeners they should read. And it's Dan Chambliss' book, How College Works. And you're about to hear part 2 of 4 of that interview. If you missed part 1, I strongly encourage you to go back and listen to that segment. I know it landed well with our listeners because a number of our listeners reached out to me and told me how much you appreciated what Dan had to say in part 1.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Friends, in part 1, Dan explained why he wrote the book, How Colleges Work, and the methods he used. And we started out sharing his key findings. Well, we continue to listen to him share his key findings from his research in part 2 of 4. Listen and enjoy. And this piece that you talked about in your book that they care about above almost anything is like friendships and the social side of college.
Of course, but that's true for professors too. They just don't admit it.
Talk about that a little more.
Well, I remember having a discussion at a top tier college about this issue, and somebody said, "Well, in our book, we talk a lot about students and their social lives and their friends and things like that." And this professor was saying, "Well, that's silly, why do they care so much? This isn't supposed to be a country club." And I said, "Well, how long have you been here?" And he said, "Oh, I've been here 8 years. I came from so and so." I said, "Well, why did you come here?" He said, "Oh, the department's great. I love the other people in it."
Right.
Right. You wanted to be around the other people who are here. That's the point. Students are the same.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with wanting to have friends.
Yeah.
And you want to be around other people who have kind of similar interests and are, you might say, going in the same direction as the direction you want to be going in, which I would say is a crucial thing in picking a college you go to.
Well, that's one of your core points too, is you talk about help motivated students to meet each other.
Yes.
And so, what are some ideas that schools can do to besides increase your selectivity so that you're identifying motivated people? That's one way, right?
Right. No, the obvious thing is for a student is you want to go to a college where there's a high proportion of motivated students, I guess is the way to put it, which is not exactly the same as selectivity, but it's close to that. I remember being in high school, and it was a very good school, but there were a lot of folks there who just kind of floated through. And that's okay. I found my group and did what we did, but it's not encouraging, I guess. Whereas I got to college and, oh my Lord, everybody I ran into wanted to talk about what they were studying and how they were working on it and what they planned to do after graduation. They were motivated, they were fired up. And that was just incredibly energizing. So the first thing is you want to go to the extent you can, go to a place where you think you'll be surrounded by other motivated people. But even within a particular institution, you can find, for instance, majors. Everybody knows which majors attract the folks who are just kind of floating through. And everybody knows the majors that are pretty serious, right? And it's not even about their academic standing exactly. It's about the attitude the students have in their courses or have about learning or accomplishing something when they get out. And so you can be deliberate. A lot of our book is about students just being, and even you don't have to do it every day, but just being a little bit deliberate in your choices about what courses you take and what professors you study with and who your friends are to some extent. You have some agency in those selections, and they're real important decisions. Who are the people you're spending time with?
Let me push back a bit on your thing. Everybody knows the quote unquote fluff majors because some people would consider sociology one of those.
Sure.
But
absolutely.
Personally, my undergrad's in psych, but I loved social psych. Social psych and sociology were my favorites. My youngest daughter who works at Keenan Flagler Business School, UNC Chapel Hill. She absolutely loved sociology, which was
That's great.
In
Well,
fact, she still
UNC
talks about going back and getting a PhD when I talk
No,
to
but
her.
I'll tell you inside tip. UNC Chapel Hill has a great sociology department.
Well, that's where she works.
And
She went to
and in
UGA.
fact,
She went to UGA, but
yeah,
she works
right,
there. Yeah.
UGA. She works
Yeah.
at UNC
Yeah, yeah,
now.
yeah, yeah.
Right, but
Uh-huh.
it depends on the school. If you go like sociology, I don't mean look for majors. When I say look for a major that has motivated students, I mean at your institution.
Mm-hmm.
You get there and you start looking around and you start watching the other students and seeing what they're doing. You start figuring out pretty quickly which departments are good and which ones aren't. And at Hamilton, we worked to make sociology not a fluff major.
Mm-hmm.
You can do that. You as faculty members can absolutely do that.
I think your point at your school is important because I know in talking to her name's
it's at the
Joy.
particular institution.
Yeah, like
They're real people.
her love of learning just took off in college.
Yeah,
You know,
that's great.
That's where she just
That's
loved to
great.
read and just all of just got the vision.
That's
and
wonderful.
and that's also hard too because you're sort of trying to balance what you're saying with what you innately love or what you love. Like
yeah.
somebody
Of course.
loves history, they want to take history. If they love
Of course,
physics, they want to.
Of course.
So there's other factors
Sure.
that come into play, right?
Right, exactly. And I would say it's not that you have to stop loving history or
Sure.
physics, but you got to be aware once you're in the real situation you're facing with the particular teachers and other students. Be aware you don't want to overcommit early is what we would say.
Yeah. Yeah.
You want to see who are the actual particular human beings we're talking about here and say, okay, given my interest, how can I feed those without spending time in a junk program?
So when you say help motivated students find each other,
Yes.
We've been focusing on that from a perspective of the student's agency and them making that decision. Like run if you're not around that and find those people. Are there also some things the institution can do now that they have that research to facilitate that?
That's a great question. Yes, but I think it would depend on the particular institution.
Okay.
And
their openness to be creative or to
their
listen?
openness to and to see what's working and what isn't working. What kind of programs work well and which don't, and you feed the good ones, basically. And you support people. On getting motivated students together, something real simple that I used to do when I was teaching is every year, kind of halfway through the year, something like that, I would sit down and draw up just a list of, a dozen or so students who I thought were real fired up. And it wasn't that they were making the best grades or that's a different question, right? But kids who were eager to learn. And I just had them out to dinner. I took them to a fancy restaurant.
Wow.
And said, well, I didn't make a big production about it. I just said, I just thought you guys might, I know you're interested in this. Maybe you'd like to meet so-and-so. And then they see each other. And that can be very powerful because a lot of these folks, depending on the school and so on, they might feel like I'm the only one who really cares about this. Or how come nobody else really wants to do this kind of work or that sort of thing. And if you can physically put them together, they're going to carry it on after that. You don't have to do it every day. The students themselves, but literally, or just saying to somebody, oh, have you ever talked to so-and-so? I think you all might have a lot in common. So it's even at that level. And it's very powerful for not much work on the teacher's part.
What are your thoughts of things like living learning communities, because I would think that at least brings people together of like-minded interests.
Yes.
And oftentimes there's a motivation for that, whether, hey, I'm going to live on the Spanish Hall or political science hall or whatever. Is that one thing that you would think, that's the kind of thing that has value?
I think it's a good thing. Yeah. And again, you see if it works.
Sure.
And sometimes you get funny results out of those. One of our daughters when she went to college, signed up for the music dorm,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because she was a classical pianist. And she got in the dorm and discovered that 90% of the people in there were guys who were playing electric guitars, usually in the middle of the night. So it
Right.
wasn't exactly,
Right.
it's,
So it doesn't, yeah. So you got to
there's
check it out
music and there's
individually.
music,
Yeah.
but yes, but in general, no, I think and she actually met her husband there. So
There you go.
it worked out nicely.
Well, another concept of that, not so much at a smaller place like Hamilton, but at Big State U that's trying to
Yeah.
compete with the Hamiltons is to have the honors college.
Yes.
And then to have honors
Yes.
college students all live residentially in the
Yeah.
same dorms.
Yeah.
Are those the kinds of things that you think, or no?
Yes and no. I
Okay.
think the idea, I think it's a good idea as long as other people can get in.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. In other words, if
Mm-hmm.
you block it, if you say, no, that's all based on your admissions. No.
Mm-hmm.
You want the door to be open.
Mm-hmm.
You want the door to be open for people who want to learn. Anytime they get interested, there's got to be a great place for them to go. That's what you want.
So let me follow up on that, because the way most of them are set up,
Yeah.
they can, depending on the school, can have very high barriers to entry on the
Yeah.
front end, or they may not. There's a lot of variation there.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
yeah.
they almost always provide a pathway for the current student to get in who is getting a high GPA in the college. And then they forget your high school record. We don't need to see anything. You've got such and such GPA here. You've proven yourself.
Yeah.
You get access. Is that the kind of thing that you think is good, or are you concerned with linking it so much to GPA?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say.
Because I noticed
that has real,
because you made that distinction between pulling 12 kids together. They may not necessarily be the 4.0s.
That's right. That's right. I mean, I would say what you really want in order to maximize a culture of learning, let's say, is what you want to do is set up things to benefit people who want to learn, right? And design programs in ways that they like. And it's not hard to do. You don't even have to come up with your own ideas. All you have to do is find the students. Like if you're teaching, I would deliberately talk to students in the class who I thought were most engaged. And say, what do you want? What should we do about this exam? There's this question. Should we do it this day, this day? What do you think? Because I knew they would pick the answer that would be best for serious learners, right? And you start building the program to benefit those people. And then other people want to be those people, right? And you get some energy going and excitement going about being that kind of person. A lot of this, truthfully, Mark, I got from studying world-class competitive swimmers.
Wow. How did you extract, what did you extract from world-class swimmers that you felt you could apply?
Because they come off of great teams.
There you go.
And that's an individual sport, you would think, right? But they come off of great teams. And the way you build a great team is by making it very favorable for the people who want to be serious. And assuming that's what we wanted, that's what we're going to do.
That's great. So the contagious impact of that.
Absolutely. That's what you want.
What about, like, some colleges have programs where they give, their students, let's say like 5, coupons to take a professor to lunch and, is that the kind of thing that you feel like the person that's serious can rise up and then they can have this possible high impact experience with the professor?
Absolutely. It gives them opportunity. A lot of people don't take the opportunity. Well, if you want to waste the money and time, okay. But, giving people the opportunity to do good stuff is important, is real important, because that feeds the hungry is the way I would describe it.
Love it.
Yeah.
Now, another thing you talk about is focusing especially on students' early careers. So what does the research shows that makes the early career so vital?
Well, okay. Again, I'll use my own example. If a student came into my program, I taught sociology, right? If a student came into our program and they took intro and it wasn't good, they would never again take a sociology course because for them, sociology wasn't good.
Sure.
Whereas if they have a great intro class, that kind of gives you the credibility for them to go on. They'll take another course, right, in the same program or with the same teacher because they have some assurance it's going to be good. So now if they're a pre-med student, they may take terrible intro courses and keep going, right, because they're committed to the major, which has its own problems, by the way. But early discouragement is not a good thing. You want students to have the best possible experiences as early as possible, because then even if their later classes aren't that good, they won't think, well, that's because the discipline's lousy, like they have belief in the field, they have belief that intellectual life can be exciting and fun and so on, which I think is really underrated. I think most professors don't understand that fun should be a part of this.
Sure. Did you look in at all at things like orientation programs, like when kids transition or, and because I would think from all the stuff you're saying that you would think these things are really vital to.
They are.
Yeah. Talk to us about your research revealed about like some schools start before you even enroll.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
They give you they reach out this person and contact them over the summer. And then when you get there, it could be very robust or it could be very flimsy.
That's right. That's right. I mean, I think when you start, it's sort of arbitrary in a sense. I mean, if you start doing the program in the summer, I don't know the difference from doing it in the fall, but the key is that their first contact needs to be a good one, right? That when they first hear from the school or show up or whatever it is, it needs to be a positive thing. The downside, a lot of orientation programs come off to students as being kind of silly. They're lightweight. They're not really doing anything significant, or they're hokey, or they don't really pan out or whatever. But that doesn't have to be the case. You can have real good orientation programs, and they're exciting and fun, and you meet people. And now I will say, a lot of times, one of the great things about orientation programs is it's a chance to meet other students, right? To make friends. Those friendships tend not to last, but that's okay because it'll get you through the first month or two until you can, start really getting to find people who you really hit it off with. They don't just happen to be in your same canoeing group or something. Yeah. But it works. They work.
So, throughout your book and even today, I'm hearing you talk about how important social connections are, friendships, fun.
Yeah.
Do you find from the professor, perspective or administration that there's a lack of understanding of how important just good old social fun is?
Sure.
Yeah. Do you find that?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, a lot of professors feel that way. And that's because we weren't particularly sociable people ourselves. We were hiding in the library or reading our books or whatever. But they're missing something, which is that people get into intellectual life itself because they enjoy it. There's something about it they enjoy. And a lot of times you study this, it goes back to my parents read to me when I was a kid. That's the classic example from elementary ed is read to your children, because then they associate love and comfort and good feelings with reading and learning about stuff, and that learning can be an enjoyable thing. There's also a lot of good research on intellectuals generally, scholars and so on, that shows that in fact a big factor for most of them is having a group they grew up with who were interested in the same sort of things. Turns out great philosophers come from groups of other philosophy students. And so even intellectual life is not nearly as isolated as you might think.
So you might see more value just to the whole concept of affinity groups, than maybe some do, just in general, because that's where you find your people.
Well, right. And who knows what those are? Who knows what those are? If you're interested in economics, and there's an economics club, though people there are likely to be interested in economics, and you find other people who want to talk about it, and then that shared interest can produce friendships, and which is great. I mean, that's the ideal situation.
Now, Dan, one thing you talk about in your book, and I'd like you to unpack it because it's a little more abstract, or maybe obtuse even, is you talk about use the arithmetic of engagement.
Oh, it is obtuse. Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah. So what do you mean by that? The arithmetic of engagement.
That was the hardest chapter in the book to write, too.
I'm sure.
It's hard to explain. It's hard to explain. The simplest way to think about it, though, is that there are a limited sort of, just by definition, there are a limited number of great teachers on a campus. I mean, there tend to be a lot, but you got to be able to find them. The students have to meet those people. And so what that part of it is that it turns out that a very small number of professors can actually have a hugely positive effect on a campus. It's kind of remarkable. Literally, a single professor can affect hundreds of students a year in a good direction, and that affects everybody else. Well, so if you're an administrator, if you're a dean, that's really important to know. Mm-hmm. Like, don't let that person slip away.
And it sounds like you might say you might want them teaching your intro course.
I might want them teaching. That's right, exactly. So they have the effect on a lot of students, again, as early as possible. But so the arithmetic of engagement is kind of a clunky title for that chapter. But it's stuff like that there are some paradoxes involved, like the small class problem is part of that as well, is that offering a lot of small classes can actually in some ways be detrimental. And administrators have to be careful about that problem. So
let me, because it was the hardest chapter for me to wrap my hands around too when I was reading your book. I feel like you've elucidated it here for me. I feel like I'm hearing you say is when you've got a superstar, you got to find a way to have that person touch as many lives as possible.
Absolutely. That's a great way to put it. No, that's a great way to put it. That's a great way to put it. Mm-hmm. Rather than worry about what everybody's doing, look at who are the real producers. I'm talking from an administrator's point of view now. Now, if you're a student, the good news is you don't really need that much contact with great people to be positively affected by them. I mean, you take one course, or I remember I went to Yale in graduate school, and I remember sitting in huge lecture halls occasionally with some major big shot, and I was just blown away. I mean, like the person I'm thinking of was just brilliant and wonderful and open, and there were hundreds of people in this room scribbling frantically, trying to keep up with all the stuff he was talking about. And it was quite exciting and engaging. And that's one person. So what the students want to do, if you're going to college, is you want to deliberately try to find some of those opportunities. And it need not be in your own field of interest at all. In fact, that's the great teachers are great because they go outside their field. They can get anybody interested.
So let me ask you about something that I think is somewhat controversial in the professor class that's the website Rate My Professors. I remember talking to a professor who became a pretty good friend for quite a while. We've lost contact recently, but she's like, I don't want a snotty-nosed 19-year-old ripping me on Rate My Professors because I gave him a C.
I don't blame her.
So that's really sort of helped me to understand that mindset, but at the same time, and I'm going to tell you, like both of my kids, I have 29 and 26-year-olds. Yeah. They would read those reviews before they would pick their courses, and they almost always found that the description they got in there is what they experienced.
Well, yeah, that's
They said engaging professors. If you kept seeing that, they got it. I remember one time, my youngest daughter, she was so bent always on arranging her schedule to have her Friday off because you have some control over that when you're picking.
Yeah,
And
sure,
so
sure.
this one time that meant she was going to have to take this professor that everybody warned her, you know,
Oh,
and
ooh.
that was a mistake.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
is.
So
I'm
she like
sorry
the
to
one time.
say.
So I wonder how you look at that because I could see on the one hand, I could see you saying, it's not objective. Somebody could pop off on somebody for
Well,
any reason, but then you could also say
well,
that's one way for a student to find out
it is.
who the high impact teachers are.
It is. When you say it's not objective, I mean, who cares? That's the
That's true.
students. An individual student's not going to be objective, right?
Sure.
They go in, they experience what they experience. I would say what you want to watch out for on those is one or two
Yes,
people
that's what
saying
I always
something.
say. Yeah.
If everybody's saying this is bad,
Yeah.
it's bad,
Yeah.
right? And if everybody says it's
Right.
great.
If the sample size is large enough, it takes on more credibility, just like research.
Yeah, and it's because it's not a random sample either. You
Yeah.
understand you're going to get extreme
Yeah.
comments most likely in either direction. But I would say you look at the overall cast. In fact, when you're picking a college, since I know this podcast goes to a lot of people who are at that stage of things, I think the qualitative guidebooks, that is the guidebooks that have written descriptions, not just numbers.
Yeah.
If you read several of those about a particular school, you'll probably get a good picture of what it's like. I think that's actually the most reliable indicator you'll get. The problem with looking at numbers is all kind of funny business happens with numbers. And unless you're an insider who's trained in those methods, it can be very misleading.
I would agree with that. Yeah, totally. Friends, this concludes this part of my interview with Dan Chambliss on his book, How Colleges Work. Hope you join us next week for the next part. Friends, it's time for the final segment with Grant Gosselin, Dean of Admissions and Chief Enrollment Officer at Boston College.
And now it's time for our College Spotlight of the Week.
All right, friends, we've reached the final part of my interview with Grant Gosselin, Dean of Admission and Financial Aid, Chief Enrollment Officer at Boston College. And in this part, Grant continues discussing BC's strongest programs, and he lets us know of a new, very exciting program at BC that was recently launched. He also talks about the BC Alumni Network, and then we talk about how does admissions work at BC. And I've been wanting to ask a senior person at BC how they interpret test scores. Are tests really optional at BC? Because a number of my students have been encouraged by BC admission officers to go ahead and submit their scores. So Grant and I have a really good conversation about that. We also talk about which other parts of the application are extremely important in the file reading process at BC. And friends, you know our tradition. All first-time guests go on the hot seat in our lightning round. So we close out with that. Listen and enjoy. And what about biology and neuroscience?
Yeah, so two different departments at BC. Our biology department is also one of our top 5 majors at BC, provides students, as I mentioned before, opportunities for research. I mentioned the hospitals. Many of our students that study biology are considering a pre-med track, and we have a pre-health program that provides them the academic and professional support to be successful as they head off to medical school. Neuroscience falls within our psychology department. If you were to look at psychology as a larger entity, I would say it would probably be one of the largest majors at BC because students can study psychology in 4 ways here. They can do a Bachelor of Science or a Bachelor of Arts in psychology, depending on whether they want to go into research or head off to become a clinical psychologist. They can study neuroscience, or they can study what's known as applied psychology and human development within the Lynch School of Education and Human Development. So lots of opportunities in that space.
So I know there are other great programs. Those are just the ones that I'm the most familiar with and my students have been selecting the most. What did I miss?
Yeah, so one of our newest majors at Boston College is human-centered engineering. And for a long time, BC didn't offer engineering, and it was really the one area that BC didn't provide. And we were seeing students that love BC, but really had an eye toward an engineering degree. And we'd have to direct them elsewhere. And now we don't have to do that. We launched our engineering program 4 years ago. We just graduated our first class this past May. And it is a highly technical engineering degree with a focus on addressing issues that affect the human condition, if you will. So thinking about engineering as a vehicle to address issues around human health, energy, and the environment, right? And challenging students not only to have that highly technical general engineering degree, but also take advantage of the full university core curriculum. We don't water that curriculum down for our engineering students. So it is a really intense program. But the idea would be that students will be looking at ways not just to add a new consumer product like an Apple Watch or something, but to design new energy systems that can address populations that are being left behind, or new health systems, new health technologies through biomedical engineering that can really transform the health system moving forward. So very much in line with our identity as a Jesuit university. Political science is a major that you didn't mention. It's one of our largest majors at BC, third largest in the Morrissey College of Arts and Sciences, over 700 majors. We have areas of specialty in comparative politics and international politics, American politics, political theory. We have the Klaus Center for Constitutional Democracy at BC that brings in outside speakers from all ends of the political spectrum. I was looking at the calendar for this year. We have Shannon Beam, host of Fox News Sunday, coming in to start off the series. We have Jill Lepore, writer for The New Yorker. We have Youssef Chahed, who's the former prime minister of Tunisia, coming in. Cardinal Pierre Battista Pizzaballa, who's the Latin patriarch of Jerusalem. So all bringing in very different perspectives of politics and allowing students a platform to be able to debate and dialogue these really important issues. And then lastly would be I can't forget my friends in the Lynch School of Education and Human Development. But the Lynch School is another top 20 undergraduate program, providing either a teacher certification track for students that are interested in teaching in the elementary or secondary settings, or interested in, as I mentioned before, applied psychology and human development, which is one of the fastest growing majors at BC.
And BC doesn't have fraternities and sororities. Explain the reason for that, because I know that's intentional.
Yeah, I'm not sure the exact initial reason for it, but I think as we think about the student community that we have built here and the student community that students so desperately want to be a part of, our philosophy is that students find the best friends based on common interests that they share. And so there's a very large culture around joining clubs and organizations at Boston College. We have over 300 clubs and organizations, and students will join those as first-year students. They'll try new clubs as they get older and move through BC as their interests change, and it allows them to continue to build social circles at BC. I've not attended an institution that had a Greek life, and I certainly know there are many people that have enjoyed that part of a student experience. But the students that come to BC, and honestly, the students that have transferred to BC after being at schools with large Greek lives, really feel as though this is a place that's going to create better community, because oftentimes when you join a fraternity or sorority, you have great community within that small segment of the university, but it doesn't always provide students the ability to branch out as broadly as students do here at BC. We have never had a push from our students to add sororities or fraternities at BC. They seem very, very content with their social experience here through the clubs that they join and the organizations that they're a part of.
Grant, I know BC's got a very strong alumni network. What can you say about that?
Yeah, it's about 200,000 plus alumni throughout the country and around the world. And we have a variety of alumni chapters, both nationally and internationally, for our alumni to be a part of. And I think it's a really important element for our undergraduates as well. As students do think about life after BC and heading out into their first job, BC does an incredible job in terms of connecting alumni with undergraduate students. We have a program known as Eagle Exchange, where we solicit our alumni base and ask for volunteers to serve as a personal mentor to undergraduate students. We have about 15,000 alumni that have volunteered to do that. We have almost a proprietary LinkedIn database where those students can connect with those alumni, put in some parameters of the industries they're interested in, maybe the geographic location they're interested in, and they'll be provided with a list of alumni who have already been pre-sorted to be interested in working with them. And so when they make that outreach to that alum, it's not like a cold call in LinkedIn. It's a real personal connection where those relationships can be built and students can find that their networking is beginning much earlier than perhaps they otherwise would have available to them. So, you look at a game day, as I mentioned before, when we have our first football game, we'll have thousands of alumni coming back with their own families and, again, continuing that pride in BC for future generations as well.
Grant, we were talking before we came on about early decision. I can't believe it's been 2020 since you've added early decision. I remember when the email came across my desk, it feels like it was just the other day that you've added early decision. A lot of our families ask, how is ED2 round different than ED1? What could you say about that, Grant?
Yeah, so it really is just a later deadline. We have really worked hard as we implemented early decision 1 and 2 to try not to have it be too much of a difference in terms of admit rates by round. Early decision 1, of course, is for those students that from the moment they finalize their college list, BC is right at the top. Early decision 2 is an option for 2 kinds of students. The first would be a student that doesn't have a top choice college on November 1st, right? They're not ready to make that commitment, but they continue their research into their senior year. And by the 1st of January, they do have a top choice. That can be a great option. And quite honestly, it's also for students that maybe BC was their second choice, right? They applied early decision elsewhere and it didn't work out for them. And this gives them another opportunity to kind of reassess their college list and have a second crack at the nut, if you will. But it's been a great opportunity for students in both rounds. The last couple of years, we have seen an increase in applicants in the early decision 2 round. And so early decision 2 has become a little bit more competitive than early decision 1, but not by a large margin. But I still do think the early bird gets the worm. So, if you are not sure BC's at the top of your list, it would probably make sense to apply ED1 if that's the case, when no spots in the class have been filled yet.
So as you know, I have several students at your school that all applied ED1, and several of them were kind of encouraged through their interaction with your counselors to go ahead and submit their test scores. Your counselors were quite transparent at giving them guidance. So you still are test optional, but how do you answer the question, should I submit my scores or not?
Yeah, it's a great question. We actually shifted our policy ever so slightly this past cycle. We are continuing to operate under a test optional admission plan, but we've begun to encourage students who have taken the exams to submit their scores. We came up against so many students that were twisting themselves in knots around this question. Do I submit or do I not? We had students that said, no, I don't want to submit my scores. I'm going to be test optional. And then accidentally in the Common App listed their scores. And we were really surprised. There were oftentimes students that had a 1490 and said, I didn't want my scores submitted, right? And that would be a student that really should consider submitting their scores, right? Those are really strong scores, both nationally and even within our pool. They're right around our average. And so, and I think there are too many students that feel unless they're above the average, they shouldn't bother. That's not the case at all, right? We know that there's predictive value in scores. We've seen that not just since the pandemic, but we saw that well before the pandemic. But we also know that there is an inconsistency in availability of score centers, test centers throughout the country and even around the world. And so that's why we're continuing to operate under a test optional plan, is for those students that really just can't access those tests. You look in the state of California, for example, that has gone completely test blind in their state system. Testing centers have closed, all over the state. And so if you're a student that doesn't have the means to travel to a nearby city or another state to take the exam, and we require them of everyone, then we miss out on that student. And that's not a way for us to, getting back to diversity and socioeconomic diversity. That's not a way for us to work toward that goal. So we continue to operate under a test optional plan. We do recommend you submit your scores. As context, this past cycle, since we made that recommendation, we did see a pretty significant increase in scores. About 75% of the students that we admitted this year submitted test scores.
I'm glad you're keeping that sensitivity, because California is the largest state for students I work with. And I could tell you horror stories of people that driving 7 hours, flying to Las Vegas, like just, that really is real, the inability to take the test out there. So one other admissions question for you, Grant, and then we'll, transition to our lightning round. But everybody wants a good student. Everybody wants a good citizen. Everybody wants someone that will contribute, right? What would be one thing you would say that maybe we emphasize this aspect of file evaluation, maybe a little bit more than maybe some other schools? Anything come to mind?
We just had a conversation where we're training our student volunteers for the next year, and this question came up, and what is our favorite part of the application, right? Where do we really feel like we get to know the student the best? And for me, it's the supplemental essay response, because the common application makes it easy to apply to college, right? And that was the intention. And many students spend a good portion of their junior year English class writing their common app response. And we see a big difference oftentimes in the quality of writing between the Common App and the supplemental essay. And the supplemental prompt is very specific to BC. It's very specific to our mission. It's related to our values as an institution. And it's designed to help us learn more about that student, right? And so it, for me, is this piece that the student can really be in the driver's seat to have an authentic voice and tell us something that's important to them, why they're resonating with the values of BC. There's a lot of conversation about AI, and certainly we know that that's a tool out there. But I would tell anyone listening here, if you are using AI to write any part of your college essay, you're really doing yourself a disservice, because you're sacrificing your opportunity to have a voice in the process. You're borrowing from other people's experiences instead of your own, and that's not the formula to success. Is we're trying to shape a class of really interesting people with a diverse set of backgrounds and experiences. So for me, it's the supplemental essay prompt that I think is often overlooked by students. It's often left to the last minute, the last weekend before they have to complete their essay, their applications. If students can get ahead of that and start working on that this summertime, they're really going to thank themselves for it when it comes time to apply.
Great advice. Love it. Love it. Love it. So anything you haven't said about BC that's on your mind to share? Because we're kind of closing down our BC portion here.
You've covered a lot. I would just encourage you, you talked about some of the impressions up front of what people think about when they leave BC, and you started with this beautiful campus. The two most common things that we hear, one are the beauty of the campus, and two are how impressed they are with our students. And so if you have listeners that are planning a college trip, I would really encourage them to do their best to get to campus and meet our students. I just had a counselor on campus last week who's in his 50th year advising high school students. And he met one of our tour guides who told him in a moment of authenticity that at the beginning of the summer, he almost didn't know if he wanted to do the job because he was so shy and so nervous. And the counselor kind of did a double take and said, I can't believe that you are a student that was shy, because he was one of the best tours I've had. And, I think BC is a special place that really helps our students evolve and grow and become the young men and women that will go out into the world and really make an impact. So I hope you all have a chance to meet our students at some point during this process.
Love it. Love it. Love it. All right. Lightning round. What do you wish your 18-year-old self knew?
That every application is going to be read by an actual person, and that we're really trying to advocate for students. We're not trying to keep students out.
If you were to go back to college, what's one thing you would do different?
I would study abroad. I didn't, back in the 90s, there wasn't as much awareness about studying abroad, and I didn't know until it was too late. The applications were already due, so I wish I had studied abroad.
And what's the best thing you did in college that you're like, you know what? That was a smart decision?
You know what? My mother told me when I went to college, again, she hadn't gone to college at that point. She told me to appreciate my professors, and at the end of every class, I was to go up to my professor and thank them. And so at the end of my computers and management class, I walked up to my professor. I extended my hand as I turned in my blue book at the time and said thank you. And he looked at me like I was crazy. Like, what? Like, nobody ever handed in their final and said thank you. He offered me a job, and I spent 3 years
Whoa,
running the Jumbotron at football and basketball games at BC. So
that is a cool story.
those interactions with faculty are priceless.
Yeah, that's awesome. It reminds me, I like to, if I get great service at a restaurant, I find the manager,
Absolutely.
because I could tell the server, and I do, but it's almost oftentimes better to go to their boss. And they're like shocked. They're like, nobody ever, nobody does that. They're so
That's
used
right.
to, you can see their guard getting ready. What complaint is coming my way? It's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, totally interesting. How do you chill? How do you relax?
I've got 3 daughters. They're active in sports, and so kind of
Oh,
being
that'll
with
keep you
them
busy.
and staying busy that way. I'm a sports fan myself, so outside of their activities, I'm a big fan of BC sports, but also all Boston sports as well.
Sure. Anything on your bucket list?
I'd like to get to a Super Bowl one day. Never done
That's
that.
cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. If you couldn't be in education, what else would appeal to you?
I've thought about this a lot. I either would have been a civil engineer, if I could do it over, or a personal financial advisor.
There you go.
One of the reasons I didn't get into finance is I had experiences in corporate world, and later in life realized, well, there's a whole element where you can really help people achieve their own financial goals, and I could have used my education perhaps in a different way that way, but no regrets. Those would only be number 2 and 3, not number 1.
Final question. What advice do you have for our listeners? So our listeners are parents, mostly, also a nice chunk of college counselors and some students. Any advice?
Yeah, I would. I would say when you go through this process, remember what I said before about where you are positioned in the world in terms of access to education. I think so many families turn themselves in knots about getting into a particular college or the right college. And there is no shortage of quality education here in the United States. And it really is a blessing and a privilege to have that opportunity. Be yourself when you go through this process. And I'm speaking to the students. A lot of times I'll have students or parents ask me a question that sends chills down my spine. And that is, what clubs or organizations should I do in high school to position me for admission to your college? And I think, it's so sad to hear that question. It's a legitimate question, and I'm not discounting it, but it sends a signal that the experiences in life are not important. It's only the next step in life. And I think if you're approaching high school as simply a means to an end for college, you're missing out on some of the best teenage years that you'll look back on fondly. You should be doing the things that you love, and you'll find colleges where you're naturally the right fit for that college. And if colleges all told you one specific thing to do and everybody did that, we wouldn't have 300 clubs. We'd have one club at BC.
There you
and
go.
It would be a pretty boring place. So do what you love, do it without apology, and tell us about it when you apply.
Well, keep preaching that message, because I'm on the counseling side. I'm no longer on the admission side, and I can't tell you how many times I get asked that, or what should my passion project be from a 14-year-old is another thing you're hearing more and more these days. And I think the more admission officers sort of, bang the drum on that message, the more it'll kind of give people the freedom to be who they are. Grant, you've been most generous with your time. You've given us almost an hour and a half. I can't thank you enough. And will you be at NACAC by any chance?
I'll be there. I'll look forward to seeing you, I hope.
Yeah. Let's make a plan. Let's make plans to try to grab a coffee or something.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Thanks for the opportunity, Mark.
Thanks, Grant. Friends, on Monday's episode, we'll have a question from a listener. And then Grace Robertson Lloyd from Grinnell, Kate Strickland from the University of Colorado, Hillary Dickman from Colorado College will be joined by 5 parents, all diligent podcast listeners and members of our listening family. And they will discuss Layla Tuft. Layla is the third and final student whose candidate will be discussed and debated. Now, you're going to get a lot more out of that discussion if you read Layla's file before Monday's podcast. Friends, I'm here in Orlando, and one of the members of our listening family generously treated me to some delectable Turkish Mediterranean food on Sunday. It was the dad, the mom, and the daughter. And the daughter and the mom and the dad, they had all gone through the case studies, so they were talking to me a lot about them over dinner. And the mom said, reading the files was the part that I found the most interesting. So please read Layla's file before Monday. Just go to yourcollegebounkid.com, go to the resources tab, click the third tab. And when you click that tab, you'll see a link to a Google Drive, and you'll see Layla's file. It's the third one. And friends, I want to leave you with a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? See you on Monday, friends. And that's our show. Big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us and you will get every single episode as soon as they are released. If you want to support our podcast, you can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can say positive things about Your College Bound Kid on your social media feed. And you can help us stay commercial free and pay our staff by donating on the yourcollegeboundkid website. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. And if you have a question or a recommendation, just go to speakpipe.com/YCBK, hit the orange button and speak. We will do our best to get your question in your own voice on an upcoming episode. I am the producer of the podcast, and I live in Metro Atlanta. We have a fantastic team that has over 200 years of admissions and counseling experience. Shout out to our co-hosts, Dr. Lisa Ruff in North Carolina, Susan Tree in Pennsylvania, Vince Garcia in California, Julia Escobar in Massachusetts, Linda Depker in Missouri, Andy Strickler, the Chief Enrollment Officer at Connecticut College, New London, Connecticut, Hillary Dickman, an Admission Officer at Colorado College in Colorado Springs, and our international admissions expert, Kevin Newton in Dallas, Texas. Our sensational sound engineer is Nemanja Matvich. Our amazing music is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs from Kimberly Bloss. Our reliable webmaster is Stalionis Dimitru. Website updates are done by Joyce Stucker. Our image editor is Vlad Honchar. If you want to have a coaching session with me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you want to reach someone else on our team, all of our bios with contact info can be found at yourcollegeboundkid.com under the About YCBK tab. If you want to get our free monthly YCBK newsletter, YCBK Plus, it is also under the About YCBK tab. If you want to see our recommended books and websites, they are on our website under the Resources tab. While you're on our website, check out our hundreds of interviews in their entirety. Check out our college spotlights, our blog, and our upcoming events. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting with you every single Monday and every single Thursday.